Hi everyone, Michael here from Mirrors of Consciousness and creator of the Orbifold Tarot and upcoming Arcanum X. So in my recent update video, I mentioned that lately I've been really interested in playing cartomancy, and so this is a little introduction to the very basics of cartomancy. Many of you who are already interested in cartomancy, you'll already know this, so you might want to wait for the next installments or skip ahead if those have already been put out by the time you're watching this. But the very basic part of cartomancy is that in a regular playing card deck, we know that we have usually two colors, black and red. And the reds, diamonds and hearts, are usually seen as warm, positive, etc. All of those, but it's really nice to keep it simple and go warm, and then the black cards are cool. Not cool as in, hey, that's so cool, but cool as in cool and a little bit withdrawn or a little bit more distance, cold. Although that can be cool. And so in simple spreads and simple readings, if you want, it's kind of the trend right now in tarot that tarot readers eschew yes or no questions of tarot. And I'm kind of one of those, but I'm kind of also a little bit, I've softened my opinion of that, because usually when people ask yes or no questions, it is the phrasing, and we could rephrase the question to something a little bit more proactive, but usually people want to know yes or no and why, or yes or no and how soon, or you know, that kind of, there's a follow-up to the yes or no. It's not, usually people don't want to know just yes or no. Sometimes they do. And if they want a quick reading, if they want like a 5-minute reading or a 1-card reading or something like that, which again, I do agree with a lot of people that, not Orbifold, sorry guys, that tarot is so much more complex and offers so much more nuance than a simple yes or no or a simple 1 card. But sometimes you just want something quicker. You don't need to know a deeper dive into certain questions, and so the question then becomes about what tool to use. So we could use a coin for yes or no questions. We could use a pendulum. I have a bunch of pendulums. I've never used them for yes or no questions. It's not what I use them for. But many people do, and it's a useful tool for that. We could use tarot. We could use any kind of cards to get a yes or no. If we're using playing cards, though, because red is warm and black is cool, that can give you an overall yes or no. So you can draw 1 card, and if it's black, it's a no. If it's a red, it's a yes. You can draw 3 cards. If there's more black, it's a no. If there's more red, it's a yes, or a positive answer. And then you can do more complex spreads. And again, you can just kind of have a quick glance over everything and go, there's more red, so it's an overall positive reading, even if there's like little stuff here and there, or if it's overall yes. And if there's more black cards overall, and so it's really easy. We could do that with tarot, but the suits aren't quite the same as with playing cards, or haven't developed in the same way as with playing cards. And with playing cards, it's just so easy to look over a spread and go, lots of red, lots of black. And with tarot, it's not always so easy, depending on which deck you're using. Of course, if you're using the Orbifold, it's easy to glance over it and go, oh, lots of earth, oh, lots of air, or whatever it is. But again, with the tarot, it's not so directly positive or negative. Every card has positive and negative meanings. The same with playing cards, but it's just a little bit more direct in that sense, a little bit more binary. But there is nuance. So as for the suits, we have the spades, hearts, clubs, and diamonds. And those are often, if you're going to read playing cards like tarot, you can just do a direct association. Spades are swords, hearts are cups, clubs are wands, and diamonds are coins or pentacles, for those of you who read post-Golden Dawn style cards. But for me, there's a little, again, there's like the Marseille Tarot, where for those of you who've seen the Marseille series, I've made a little bit of a comment about maybe the elements aren't so individuated to each suit. Yes, there's correspondences, but each suit is maybe not exclusively one element. Even if you do associate different suits with different elements in playing cards, it again is a little bit different. So spades are often seen as earth, which if you think about a spade, the garden tool, spades are used for digging. Spades are used in the earth to separate the earth. So there's a little bit of a combination between air and earth, because there's the separation, there's the cleaving, there's the demarcation of land, separating of land. And so it's earth, but it's also a little bit air. So there's the sword aspect of air, but then it's also earth, because you're working with the earth, you're digging into the earth. And then with hearts are a little bit more of a direct. Hearts are kind of like the queens. Queens also, different tarot correspondences have all kinds of different elemental correspondences with each of the courts, but almost always queens are associated with water, cups almost always associated with water also, whereas different systems have all kinds of other different associations. But the ones that seem to be most consistent is queens, cups, hearts, water, all water. With hearts it makes sense, because heart, if you think of your heart, it's like pumping blood. It's working with the fluids in your body. So that's associated with water. But at the same time, hearts are also about your passions. And that has a fiery element. Even the blood itself. Blood is kind of, it's not just water, it's not just liquid. It's associated with fire and passion and life. And so there's a bit of a fire-water mix going on with the hearts. Going back actually second to spades, if you're going to associate the spades to a structure in the body, they're usually associated with bones, which again are a little bit of an earth-air combo. They're earthy because they're solid, or they're structural. They hold your body up. They're made mostly of mineral, calcium and other minerals, and so they have an earthy nature. At the same time, they as we get older, the bones tend to lose their density. Even if you don't have diagnosed osteoporosis, bones lose density over time. And that's actually kind of an air process of dissipation of the minerals. And bones are actually full, they're hollow. Your bones are hollow. The center of your bones they're not totally hollow. They're made of a spongy structure called marrow, but there's air. They're more air, actually. We think of them as earth, but they're actually more air, because to be useful structures, they actually need to be fairly lightweight. They need to be strong, but they need to be fairly lightweight. Otherwise, we would weigh a lot more if our bones were all solid, if they didn't have marrow. So it's just an interesting, little bit more nuanced, but the primary element of spades is earth, and primary element of hearts is water. Then we move to clubs, and clubs are associated with air, which again is different from tarot depending on which system you adhere to. So clubs would usually be associated with wands, which I associate with fire, but other systems associate with air. For the clubs, I actually would associate both fire and air to them, and maybe even a little bit of earth, because clubs, they're like a clover. They're kind of the organic thing growing out of the earth, that earth that you cleaved, that you toiled, that you worked with the spades, and then maybe watered with your heart, with your waters, and gave sunlight, heat to. That's also fire. That grows your clubs, your clovers. So the clover, the club is kind of the result of fire, water, and earth, and is growing into the air. So it's kind of a bunch of elements put together. So depending on which cards are with it, and which number of card it is, which, is it a 2, is it a 3, is it a 4, may change, or depending on the question, the topic of the reading, may change the elemental focus of each of the cards. Clubs are generally associated with work, and not necessarily your job, but just effort. So that again has a fire element to it, but it also has to do with plans and processes and figuring things out, which is a mental air issue. So it's just kind of interesting to think that the primary elemental associations for each of the cards, each of the suits, isn't a hard and fast rule, at least for me. And it gives you a lot more interpretive possibility, and in that, potentially more accuracy. And then we get to diamonds. And diamonds, again, depending on the system, but it seems to be fairly consistent that diamonds are actually associated with fire, which is interesting because if we correspond the suits to tarot, again, diamonds are associated with coins, which are usually earth. Diamonds are still have some of the similar connotations of resources, money, rewards, sustenance, things like that. But there is that fire aspect to it that's really interesting. So there's an earth element, earth aspect, but its primary association is fire. And to me, there's also a bit of air there, or even though it's not one of the classical elements, light, because diamonds sparkle and shine and shimmer. So it's kind of like the reward after the labor, after the growth. You've tilled the soil, you've put in your passion, you put in your blood, sweat, and tears. Something has grown out of that, you put in the work, something has grown, and then the reward afterward is the diamond, which could be money, It could be other forms of reward. And then it can also be sort of interesting to look at the suits in pairs. So the first pairing, the obvious pairing, is how we started, where we have the reds and we have the blacks. Red and black, warm and cool. But then we can pair the spade and the heart, which oppose each other. The spade, they're basically the same shape, except the spade has a stem. So the spade is also a little bit, it has that foot, it has a little stem. It's like a foot on, furniture. You put feet on a piece of furniture, or a claw foot bathtub, right? They have these little feet, and so that kind of anchors it more to the earth, which is another similarity between, they're not just black together, but the club and the spade both have feet, whereas the diamond and the heart, they don't have feet. They're kind of free. They're kind of floating, suspended somewhere in something. What are they suspended in? Whereas the club and the spade have feet. But back to the pairing of the spade and the heart, is that they're the same shape. If you turn the heart upside down, here, we'll do if you turn the heart upside down, that part of the heart, it's basically a spade without a foot. And if you turn the spade, we'll turn the spade upside down, it's a heart that's actually got a fount if it's upside down. So it's the same shape, so there's a relationship. And so hearts are kind of very positive. Spades are usually seen as the most negative suit of playing cards. And so there's that opposition. They're so far away from each other, but yet they're really closely related because of their shape. So that can be one thing to look at that's interesting. With clubs and diamonds, that's the second pair that we can break out of between instead of red and black. And the diamond is kind of concentrating with its points, and then the club is like the points are the concentrated part, but then the circles around it are the flowering of that concentrated point. And so they're oppositional in that sense. And again, they're oppositional like the heart and the spade. They're oppositional in the sense that the club has a foot and the diamond doesn't. And then we can look at a second set of pairings, or a third set of pairings, which is that the spade and the diamond have pointed tips, so they're sharp. They're the sharpest two suits together. Diamonds are sharper than spades, but they're both sharp. They're both they have this potential to be cutting, or to cut through things, or to just be pointed. Whereas the heart and the club are more rounded. Yeah, they have points. The bottom of the heart is a point, and the club kind of has points on the foot, but the overall sense is that it's round, and it's softer. So the heart and the club are softer. So we have warm, cool, floating, not floating, floating or grounded, pointed, rounded, and up or down for the club and the spade, the spade and the heart. And so these different relationships, even though the shapes are so simple, anyone wonder why I like playing cards? Simplicity, minimalism. But there's still so much more when we dig into the differences in those shapes, and then what could those things mean. And so similarly, like clubs in their roundedness and in that relationship between clubs and diamonds, clubs are like people clumping together. So you can think of a club, like a sports club, where people come together to socialize. And that could be related to heart, because hearts are relationships, but it's like little clumps, little collections of people and coming together. Whereas diamond is like, it's kind of more individual and it's dispersive. The diamond shines and goes in all directions. And so it kind of stands alone. There can be clumps of diamonds, but they're a little bit more, instead of drawing in and coming together and forming a group, it's more dispersive. It's more, okay, we've collected, we've gotten this stuff together as a group, and now we're going to share it. Or I've collected my thoughts and now I'm going to distribute it. So that's kind of the diamonds. Hearts are not just your passions, obviously, not just your physical heart and the fluids of the body system, but very directly your emotions and relationships. And it doesn't have to be romantic relationships necessarily, although of course in traditional views with romantic questions, if there's lots of hearts there, that's usually seen as a good sign. But it's your emotions, it's your connections to people. So the clubs are a little bit of a network, but that network is not necessarily related to emotional bonds. There's a little bit of a community sense or a transactional sense, which is also how it relates to work. So when we're networking, the word work is in that word networking. When we're networking, it's usually with the intent of making new connections, new opportunities for our businesses or for our work or for our to get ourselves known in some sense that it's going to have some kind of work related. And again, it doesn't have to be work in the sense of being paid, but it is related to the things that you do. And yes, there can be romantic or emotional bonds that are formed in that, but it's different. And so that's that relationship between the roundedness of the heart, the roundedness of the clubs. That softness of round clubs and round hearts gives us that sense of people being soft enough or being round enough to kind of interface, to come together and exchange between each other. Whereas the diamond and the spade are a little bit more loners. They're a little bit, they might still interact with people. They still might interact with each other, but they're a little bit more standalone. They're a little bit more independent. So, and then spades, in that independence, there's a sense, even though spades are often seen as negative, I think because of their cutting nature and the relationship of spades with digging into soil. Spades also, they're not only garden implements, spades are also weapons. So a spear, another name for a spear is a spade. And most like arrowheads and many weapons have that spade shape, that pointed shape. So they are seen as negative because they're seen as a challenge. If someone's shooting arrows at you, figuratively or literally, nowadays it's usually only, thankfully, figurative, not literal, but when someone's shooting arrows at you, that's a bad thing. If you've got your spear out for attacking or for defense, that's a bad thing. If you're digging the soil, sometimes that can be a bad thing, and that's the relationship. Sometimes, you know, spades have the relationship with death. Because what do we use to cut the ground for graves? But a spade. So, and the relationship with bones and that airy earth thing. So when the bones turn to air, usually that happens after death, right? Or if your bones are disintegrating, then you're getting closer to death. So there's that, but there's also the aspect of digging and preparing the soil, preparing things and uprooting things, turning the soil to get it prepared for fresh growth, for fresh ideas, for new plants. And sometimes things have to be turned over. If the soil is barren, if the soil is stale, and all the nutrients have leached down, that's why we toil the soil. That's why we use a spade and turn it, is to get all those nutrients that have kind of leached down through the soil down to the bottom. We turn that nutrient-rich soil up over onto the top. And so there's overall for the spade suit, if we're going to relate it to tarot, it's kind of the spades suit have aspects of the moon, aspects of the tower, aspects of the hermit, all kind of wrapped up in that suit. So on the surface, we can see, you know, a reading with lots of spades as being a negative thing, but this is maybe the tarot view coming out, and being applied to the way that I read playing cards. It can be really positive because you can turn over stagnancy by using the spades and digging things up, dig deeper, right? That old acting saying that's now become cliche of dig deeper, dig deeper, dig deeper. And so spades are about that. Spades are about digging and digging deeper, and delineating, you know, marking space, delineating. And so that can also be really positive. And on a more kind of esoteric turn, spades are usually also the suit that's associated with witchcraft and magic. So one of the things that we do in ritual, one of the first things we do is demarcate space. We delineate space, and then we release that space. So, but that's like a first step and a last step always is mark the space, release the space, and then the other workings happen in between those two ends. So anyway, this is a very rambly video. It's not that organized, and that's okay, because when you read, when your cards turn up on the table, they're not going to be necessarily in the order that you learned them. So it's kind of good for your brain to behave a little bit more rambly. And that's my excuse for making a rambly video about the suits and the colors. With that, I guess I'll cut myself off there and return to you with probably another rambly video about the suits and seasons, timings, and stuff like that. More generics about each suit, but from another different perspective. Until next time.